Hi, fourth graders. Miss Scott here. Tonight, I want to come to you and talk to you about our new dress up that we're going to be doing for our paragraphs this week. And you're asking yourself, a dress up? What do you mean by that, Miss Scott? Exactly that. We're just going to dress up our paragraphs using certain parts of speech, certain clauses, certain openers, certain types of sentence structures to make our sentences, our writing stronger, more interesting, and just overall better. So the first dress up that we're going to be talking about is an ly adverb. Now you're thinking, I know what a subject is, I know what a predicate is, I know what a verb is, I know what a noun is, because those are things that we've talked about so far. But what is an adverb? Well, here we go. An adverb, it modifies a verb, an adjective, or another adverb. That's the grammatical definition of an adverb. It's going to modify a verb, an adjective, or an adverb. And you're thinking, how does that go into a sentence? Well, I'm glad you thought that. I'm glad you asked because I'm going to show you. So adverbs typically follow two rules. They typically are going to ask how or when something is done. Those are two questions in which adverbs are always going to answer: how something is done or when something is done. And let me show you what that looks like used in a sentence. So for the example of how something was done, the sentence I have put together for you is the dog jumped slowly over the puddle. And you will notice right here that we have an ly word. And if we look at it closely, we realize that it follows our verb, which is jumped. And it's telling us how the dog jumped. So the dog jumped slowly over the puddle. So how did the dog jump? He jumped slowly. So that's one example of how to use an ly adverb answering the question how. Now, for an example of a sentence with answering the question when something was done, I was able to ask my freshman to help me come up with a sentence, and this is the sentence he came up with for us today. And it says, in English, we are currently reading Romeo and Juliet. So again, we see that we have an ly verb, and it is following our verb are. And this sentence says, in English, we are currently reading Romeo and Juliet. So when are we reading Romeo and Juliet? Well, we're reading Romeo and Juliet currently. So that is the second example of what an adverb answers, and that tells us when something happens. Now, this is not going to be the first time that you are going to see the word dress ups. We're going to have a total of 6 different dress ups starting this week with ly adverbs that we are going to work on for the next 21-ish weeks as far as our book goes, which will lead us through the remainder of the year. So our first dress up that we're going to talk about, which we're talking about this week, is an ly adverb. And the next 5 are in no particular order. It's just whichever way my cards are being laid out tonight. So the next dress up that we're going to talk about is a who which clause. From there, we're going to talk about strong verbs. Our goal is to get rid of verbs like ate and walked slept. And we want to use strong verbs. Instead of walking, we could say prowling. Instead of ate, we could say devoured. Another dress up that we're going to be using are because clauses. And then we're going to have quality adjectives. And the last one, which again, these are in no particular order, is a www.asia clause. Now, your kids already learned what www.asia clauses are because we used them when we were correcting run-on sentences. www.asia clauses are great ways to connect two independent sentences and make them one longer, grammatically correct sentence. And these letters, WWWASIA, actually stand for something. And I encourage you to ask your children, what is a www.asia.wabub clause? And they should be able to tell you mostly what each of these letters stand for. Now, those are the 6 dress ups that we will go over starting this week with ly adverb, and that we will run through the remainder of the year. Now, we are also going to have some other things that we will be adding to our papers in the form of sentence openers. One of those sentence openers are going to be prepositional phrases. For an example, in the morning, Mr. Scott will go to work. In being our preposition there. The second type of sentence opener that we're going to have is a very short sentence. Now, you're going to say, my student's really good at that. And you're right, they are great at making very short sentences. But when the IEW process, as we go through it, as it deepens, as your children learn, and as they grow and their writing becomes stronger, very short sentences are going to be harder to put in our papers, but there's always up for a challenge. And then the last sentence opener is an ly adverb, which should be pretty easy because this week we are learning that ly adverbs answer how and when something is done. And an example of an ly adverb as an opener would be currently I am making sandwiches for the week. And that one would be currently is our ly adverb. So these are just some of the dress ups that we are going to be including, some of the changes that are going to be happening in your students' paper from now until the end of the year. So this week, the only thing that we're working on is our ly adverb. That is what we are working on this week, is an ly adverb. But in addition to that ly adverb, your students will also be putting in 2 vocabulary words. And they are coming from, they'll either use the word beast, gnaw, trumpet, or inspire. So they must use one from previous weeks. So those are the 4 that we have currently worked on over the last couple weeks are beast, gnaw, trumpet, and inspire. And the 2 new ones that are going out on Monday are quietly and immediately. You will also notice that those are ly adverbs. So you can pretty much knock out 2 birds with 1 stone this week using a vocabulary word as an ly adverb. Quietly, the lioness prowled the field, or immediately the lioness attacked an oxen. So those are just the 2 vocabulary words that we're going to be introducing tomorrow. So you're going to be putting in a new vocabulary word, an old vocabulary word, and an ly adverb into this week's paper. So I hope that gives you just a little overview of what is coming down the pipe. And this is coming to you a little earlier than normal because tomorrow afternoon I'll be at a cross-country match for my son. So anyway, I hope you all have a great week. Please feel free to reach out with questions. Your students should have these vocabulary words in their green folder on a yellow piece of paper. And then they will also be getting a sheet that's going to have LY adverb dress-ups on them. That's going to tell you exactly what I did, how and when something happens, and it's going to give them a few examples in case they decide they don't want to use one of the vocabulary words and they want to use something differently. So be looking for that in their green folders as well. I hope you all have a great week.